There's Frank.
All right, so, okay, well, good evening, everyone. We have a quorum. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And if you could just say your name and present if you're here, and if you're online, say you're participating remotely. So why don't we start with Ed?
Ed Mazzella, present.
Bob Slaney present.
Hugh Callahan present.
Matt Rosen, present.
Peter Michelson, present.
And Jeremy.
Jeremy Marcet, I'm participating remotely.
And Jill.
Jill Rafter, participating remotely.
Okay, great. Okay, well, being recorded, it is 7:04, and the we are ready to kick off the meeting. I guess a couple of administrative things before we get into the department presentations. I'd like to kind of just get a gauge on when you think some of your budget areas will be ready to talk to present to the full warrant committee. We have like 3 meetings left before the warrant committee hearing. So there's a meeting after today. There's a meeting on February 28th. We added one. Even though the agenda says the 9th, it's actually the 6th of March. So it's actually, the agenda says February 8th, March 8th, but it's March 6th, which is a Monday. And that's the one, when we initially set out the dates, we said we were going to think about adding, and I think we're going to need that. So, and then March 14th is the last one before the warrant committee hearing. I mean, we could always use that warrant committee hearing, to conduct business that day, because the hearing typically doesn't last too long. I don't know, Jill, you mentioned some of your budget areas were moving along, and you might be ready next meeting, the 28th,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, I should have the Council on Aging, Medfield Outreach, and some of the smaller non-departmental budgets ready to go, and hopefully Park and Rec. Just need to reach out to them, but I've met with
Okay.
a few of them already. So just finalizing a couple of details, and then I'll let you know too on who's going to join us.
Okay, all right. So I'll put you down for February 20. We are on February 28th, Jeremy. I also have Public Works scheduled for all of it. I assume that's okay.
Yeah, that should still be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so and then Peter, I know you have a couple small budgets that we could fill in.
Christine's, like most one, Christine's been rejecting me, so,
I think it's actually called avoiding, but
so.
Well, we could always get those towards the end, I guess, and I know Brent has a couple small areas.
But I mean, kidding aside, if I could, next week is school vacation week, which is no big deal at all for me. If I can later this week,
you'll be ready to go.
we can be ready
Yeah.
next Monday for the 3rd, excuse me, on the 28th as well, but,
Okay. Okay,
so we'll just have to see.
Mather, maybe we should schedule you for the 6th. Is that
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
fine with that. I gotta get some information from Christine, not to put her on the spot, but I'm just happy to go whenever that information.
that's the
Yeah.
day we were going to do the capital budget. So it's
On
the
the
6th. Yeah.
Happy to do that.
It maybe makes sense to put the facilities. the
That's
same
what
way.
I want,
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Well, and then I think those are the big areas that I want to make sure we cover. Then we'll have plenty of time to get into the articles after we get through all these budgets.
And the police chief's ready to go whenever you are.
Okay, good. All right. Ready for the police?
Sure. Always ready for the police. So you want to,
Looks like they're There she is.
So,
Good evening.
good
Hi,
evening, Chief.
how is everyone?
We're doing well. How are you?
I am good. I have the reason for my little delay. I was telling Christine, I have a little canine chorus going on at work at home right now, so I have treats. I'm going to try and feed them and keep them quiet while we do this.
All right, so let me just give a quick introduction and then we'll move on to the issues in the areas that Chief Garrett wants to, present tonight. As I looking back, I saw it was in April 2019 that Chief came on board. So she's now in her 4th year. I would say that from our observations, significant progress in the area of capital improvements, particularly with police vehicles, which is now on schedule. So there was significant work and investment that was made in that area. And also, I know the chief will go into more detail, but at this point, she's reporting that the force will be coming into full staff now. And she'll explain, I think, some of the areas in training and where the hires stand. After a couple of years here of some turnover, which if you saw in the cash report that some of the turn back from the department was because of the turnover in the department. The note I make is that the fiscal year 23 spending, which is very close to 24, it constitutes about 23% of the town's department budget. So a significant piece of the budget is in the police department. Our current budget staffing is 19 sworn officers, including the chief and the deputy chief. The operating budget salaries comprise 89% of the budget. So it's in the staff and the patrols that make up the budget. The budget does include the anticipated costs. Christine, I want to confirm this with the collective bargaining that's now ongoing. But it's based upon a memo of understanding, so there's no specific details that can be presented on that at this time. But it is in the number, just for your knowledge. The budget going into this year, is in the report that was sent out by Frank earlier, with the detail of the budget, shows that salaries are actually reducing by about a little over 1%, based upon, I think, lower wage rates and from the new hires, so that lower a different staffing tier, and also that there are increases in the operating costs. 2 areas: gasoline is up about $12,500, and uniforms are up $12,000. One reflective of both costs and increased activity, I think, on the gasoline side, and uniforms for new hires. Overall, the operations cost will be up about little over 1%. One other area that's responsibility is in traffic markings, which is reducing about $18,000 from prior year's budget, and that's reflective of some sharing of costs and some responsibilities with the DPW. I think they bought a piece of a capital equipment, so they'll be engaged with the markings on some of the crossroads, and that's a reduction in the cost of the police. I suspect that might be something that might be picked up on a DPW, but it does reflect this in this department. So capital expenditures this year, as I mentioned, with the prior year's investments, is one item is a replacement of an unmarked police vehicle that's now being used. It's a 10-year vehicle that's being replaced. That's the only capital item of significance in the current year. So again, I think it's overall, the budget reflects a reduction, and that's sort of my overview. But Chief, I'll give you the floor and let you take it. One of the areas I have passed out to the team, to the group here is the goals that you have on activities of the past calendar year. So if you do want to address that, the committee does have a copy of the report that you gave me.
Okay, fantastic.
on activity.
So I do want to just clarify a couple of small things. Sorry, I've got a ton of feedback on my side. There was, Sorry, I've got a ton of feedback on my. Turn that down, actually. So last year, we actually had come up to full staffing. We were waiting for our final officer to come in from the academy. We were budgeted for him, as you know, and I talked briefly about this.
Hey,
separated
Chief,
federal-
Chief. Hey, Chief, we're
Yes,
having a hard time hearing you.
Yes.
I wonder if, sometimes I know, at least at my house, if my internet's a little weak, I shut my video off and then the sound is better, but I don't know if that, we'd love to see you, but it's more important to hear you.
no, let me try doing that. Hang on. Let me try doing that. Hang on.
Okay.
So I can tell you that there's a tremendous amount of feedback. There's a delay. So I can hear everything that I'm saying to you.
You're getting feedback,
That
huh?
was getting worse.
Yeah, that's getting worse.
Chief, can you sign out and sign back in, please?
Absolutely.
Do I need to promote her or can you do
Yeah,
that?
I can.
Hopefully she can get a better connection.
Yeah. By the way, thank you, Assistant Secretary, for sending me presentation on the Tri-County vocational. When I was listening to it remotely, I couldn't,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
worse than that. And then when you sent me your
Hey,
thing,
while we're waiting for her, why don't we, one thing I forgot was the minutes from the last meeting. So if there are any comments or questions, if not, I'd entertain a motion.
A motion to approve minutes of January 31st as submitted.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
In favor, aye. Aye.
Yeah,
Aye.
and Jeremy? And
Aye.
are you a yes, Jeremy? Okay, and Jill?
Hi, yes. Mhm.
Jill, can't hear you, you're muted.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Jill?
Hello? Yes.
Yeah, I think you
Okay.
might have a problem with some of these. Sounds like she has a problem too.
Sounds like Jeremy can hear her, it seems like he's saying.
Yeah, and
Jeremy said thumbs up, Joe, he can hear you.
Right beside her.
yeah, Brent, Brent just joined the meeting. We are voting on the minutes from the last meeting. Yes, you're yes. Okay, great.
All right. The problem may be, there's too many people in the room on the Wi-Fi.
Too many people in this room on Wi-Fi. Okay. Shut mine off. We need this computer.
That one's running, yeah.
okay, I just got off from my phone, whatever.
Okay.
Do you want me to get off?
Now let's see.
Hi. Is that any better?
Steve, I think, I think someone may be on mute in the room.
I'm on mute. My computer's on mute, should it not be on mute?
You're on mute, okay, Chief, try now,
How's that? Any better?
that's
Yeah,
better.
much better.
There we go.
All right, fantastic. I love technology.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So as you know, we had a difficult year with staffing. We separated from some of our officers. That being said, I think we have a fantastic group right now, very committed to the town. One of the things I can talk about in their commitment to the town is knowing that we were going to be a little short-staffed this year. The officers agreed to change their work schedule. This had a positive effect not only on our budget, but our ability to backfill our staffing and the balance of work life for the officers. So they switched to a 12-hour shift. It's working 2 days and then they have 2 days off. So they end up having 15 days off a month, which is considerably more than what they were doing on their previous schedule. But the benefits to us are that we've been able to maintain our daily staffing and reducing overtime so that the officer has more time off. And we obviously have a cost savings. I'll just give you a couple quick numbers on that. We dropped down from 1,730 hours of overtime during the same time frame we evaluated to 816 hours. So that was just a huge reduction. I did want to start, and I kind of got off track here by saying my thanks both to Bob. He's extremely patient and wonderful when we go through the budget process. And I think he really tries to understand, where we're at and what we're doing. And I wanted to thank the Warrant Committee, not just for this year, for the last 4 years. The fact is, as Bob mentioned, we have a first top-notch rate building. We have a new fleet, which has now set us into a fleet management program where we will only need to replace our cruisers one every 1 or 2 years, barring obviously some catastrophic motor vehicle collision or repair issue. Our equipment this past year, we were able to purchase brand new radios. We were able to get new weapons. So our department is extremely well equipped. I think that's a testament to how much the town supports just officer wellness and safety. So, we've benefited greatly from the Warrant Committee and your dedication to us, and I want to thank you for that. I'm not going to bore you by going through the entire letter that I have. I wanted you to have some points of reference for it. I did want to tell you that the numbers at the back where they're saying offenses IBR, so IBR is our incident-based reporting. We actually participate, we became compliant in 2020 with NIBRS, which is the National Incident-Based Reporting System. These numbers that we have here, unfortunately, they're going to be a little off and we're making the adjustment on them now. So Frank, you have that in my annual report. I need to change it. But the good news is the numbers are actually going to go down. So what these numbers reflect is we obviously have certain reporting guidelines for part 1, part 2 crimes. So crimes against the person, crimes against society, crimes against property, and then our bylaw offenses. What will happen is that a call will come in. So I'll give you an example of a sexual assault call that came in. It's listed as a sexual assault, which is a crime 1 offense, part 1 offense. However, when we go in and we read the report, it showed that the assault did not occur in the town of Medfield. So it's actually not our crime statistic to report. Unfortunately, those have to be manually changed. I assign this to either a supervisor or a detective to go back in because it would be wildly inappropriate for me as the executive of the organization to change our reporting numbers. So I always make sure that there's an objective eye correcting that. So basically what will happen is for that particular case, the sexual assault will be changed to assist another agency or something to that effect. So some of these are going to change, but this would be our worst case scenario. I do want to just kind of reiterate what Bob was saying. Some of our staffing numbers have gone down, our salary numbers, simply because as we bring in new officers, we bring them in at a lower step than what some of our other officers were making. We do have increases in gasoline. As you know, in keeping with the green initiative that the town is moving forward with. We are going to be trying to switch over to hybrid vehicles. I have made one capital request this year for an undercover or an unmarked cruiser. We plan to purchase that as a hybrid if we are awarded the money in capital. I'll just give you the reason for that. Our unmarked cars are a necessity for what we do. It allows us to go and talk to witnesses and victims without having to re-victimize them by having a police car outside their house. It also allows us to transport any witnesses or victims to court, and we do use it as a court vehicle as well. There are obviously some other undercover uses that they're beneficial for, but the car that we are currently looking to replace is over 10 years old and has about 100,000 miles on it. It's starting to show some wear and tear in the body. Our gasoline is up. Again, we have increased activity, plus the price of gas has gone up considerably. The reason for our uniform budget going up is actually more related to a CBA issue. There's a cleaning allowance that's provided. It had been erroneously been taken out of the salary line. We went to fix that error, so we're taking it from the line item that it should be taken from, which is uniforms. So that's why you're seeing that increase there. Again, just kind of touching back on what Bob said, line painting, the costs were astronomical this year. The hand painting in particular. So the lines that we do on the street, the long lines went from 5 cents a linear foot to 7 cents. But the hand paintings where it says school, stop lines, things like that, almost doubled in price. So it was a huge increase for us this year to absorb. Mo Goulet and I met with Frank probably about a month ago now. And last year, Mo had purchased a line painting machine to do the hand painting. He's just he has to train some of his people to do that. But we were able to shave off a lot of our costs because he was willing to pick up that additional task.
So Chief, what line item is that in the line painting?
That's it's in a separate department. It's signs and
Oh, it's not in her department.
it's in a department. No, I think it's the third page there. Maybe it's the bottom of that page.
Oh, here it is, right before the grand total.
Of traffic encumbrance?
Yeah, no, one more.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Oh.
I got it marked in traffic.
Sign operations.
Traffic marking.
Thank you.
It's markings, and there's also the animal control officer is also part of the police department budget.
Okay.
So it's going down.
Yeah, it's going down because that's the piece that the DPW is now doing.
Okay.
So it's kind of a department shift. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
yeah, it's just a shift.
Okay, thanks, sorry to disrupt your flow there, Michelle.
No, that's okay. And while it's a shift, I still believe there's going to be a significant cost savings. We would have had to increase our line marking considerably this year. We hadn't done that. We were looking at fuel costs that they're now surcharging us for, like I said, as well as they doubled the hand painting. So we would have been closer to requesting $60,000 if Mo hadn't stepped in and offered his help. So it's one of the things I really enjoy about working with the town is that the department heads do work really well together to try and help each other out. And this was a true case of that. So I won't babble on anymore. How about I answer whatever questions you have and not waste your time?
No, Chief, you're not wasting time. Let me just, before you open it up, can you give a little bit more detail on the staffing, where it stands now, because I think there's what's on board, the hiring and the training that's gonna bring you to the full complement of
Yeah, and in particular, I would be interested on that point. I think you mentioned there's 19 officers in the currently?
No.
Or that's what you're
Budget.
planning, that's the FY24 goal and budget, okay, got it. Okay,
But I think, and to that point, Steve, I think, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have the people in the queue and either in training or in the job queue that will get you to that number?
Yes and no. So there've been a couple of changes that have developed over the last day or two. And I'm going to speak pretty bluntly about this. We are part of civil service. many agencies are opting out of civil service right now. One of the issues that we have in civil service is that we don't typically get a lot of residents applying for the position. So as a result, what we get off the list are the veterans and disabled veterans, all qualified people. Unfortunately, that list is comprised of people that are just trying to get on a police department, not specifically Medfield. So what we found, and if you notice, through the years, we have turnover. We are essentially a training facility for officers that would like to go someplace else, but because of civil service, get an opportunity with us that we can't pass. I had a candidate, I'll tell you, in the middle of conducting his interview, I said, one of our standard questions is, why do you want to police in Medfield? And his response was, I don't. I'm going to police wherever the first person who hires me is. And then if I can get the state police, I'll do that. So as a manager interviewing a candidate, you can imagine that's not what you want to hear when you say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And they basically say anywhere but here. So, I think we have to do something about that and start getting candidates that are interested in coming. So to that end, we had a candidate signed up for the police academy. We actually had 2. The gentleman that I just spoke of, he emailed me and said he did get an offer from the state police and he took that. And the other gentleman, we had him registered, signed up to go, wanted to get him his uniforms, and he informed me that he was going to be going to another police department. So I did ask, because I want to know if this is an issue that something we can fix. Is it salary based? Are we being competitive? Is it about opportunity and advancement? And ironically, it had nothing to do with any of those things. He just said, well, this place is closer to my house. So, this is an investment that we continue to make to interview people, conduct background investigations, do psychological testing, medical testing. And their intention is not to stay with us anyway. It's kind of, where can I get the next best offer? So it's been a challenge for us.
So I know that there'll be more conversation with the article comes forward, but from your overview of those 2 examples, the size of the available pool has a significant impact on your ability to staff.
Yes, so we called for a list. The fact is, I know we need bodies, and I'm not going to try and sit here and sugarcoat being short-staffed. We're short-staffed like every department around us. Nobody wants it to be that way. But I also have an obligation to hire qualified candidates. And that's more important than quantity, is quality. So as we looked at our civil service list and the signatures that we were getting, we were close to 300 spots down before we had signatures. That's worrisome to me. And it was reflective in some of our interviews. So we took the best candidates that we had available. We just hired Officer Plant. We have Officer Davis, who is on our list. And I know there was some confusion on social media that we hired him as a special. He is actually a fully trained police officer, having gone through the Bridge Academy, and he just simply needs to have 2,400 hours of street work. He is very close to that mark now. So we can hire him as a special. He can work as a police officer for us and complete his training that way. That's very different, and it's advantage to us than when I have to hire somebody who is not a trained policeman. It takes us about 4 months to get them into a police academy, 6 months at the academy, and 2 more months of field training when they get back. So it's a year wait for me to get a body. So you can understand how frustrating that is, to put that time, money, and effort in, and then have a candidate turn and leave the minute they're trained because they have a better opportunity available to them. So, these are some of our challenges.
I can imagine that's gotta be extremely frustrating. That's so Chief, how many, I know your goal is, your budget request is for 19. What's your count now, today?
So we have 11 civil service members. We have Officer Davis, who will be a civil service member, myself, and we have another candidate that we are finishing up his medical. We actually just finished it. So he should be starting the academy hopefully in April.
Was that 13 or 14? Okay, 14, okay.
Chief, you mentioned earlier that the officers agreed to 12-hour shifts, and that saved us a lot of money in overtime. When you get to full staff, will that remain the same? That schedule?
So I'll be honest, the 12-hour shift is widely used in other areas of the country. New England tends to be a little bit resistant to change, very steeped in tradition. That's pretty typical. One of the things that we wanted to do is recognizing that our younger officers value time off more than wages. We thought this would be an opportunity to present this to them. We agreed to a 6-month trial of it, which will sunset April 30th. We did leave the option with the officers to negotiate an extension at that time if they choose.
And just one other question. So the last year you were at full staff, was that was in 22? Is that, or?
Yes, in February of 22, we hired an officer that brought us to full staffing. We had, let's see, myself, the deputy, 16 officers working with one in the academy.
Okay, so this budget gets them back to where they were in 22. Okay, all right.
So the biggest thing for us, and you know, I'll say, and it's a tough thing to say, is we're running so short, and obviously nationally police departments are scavenging for bodies right now. Bob and I had a conversation. I don't know if you guys follow the news, but Boston police is actually accepting lateral transfers right now. It's the first time they've done it in a couple of decades, I believe, just because they're desperate for bodies as well. Luckily for us, we're not really competing against Boston. You know, our officers that come to small town policing want to do small town policing, but I will tell you that we are competing against Millis, Dover, Sherburne, Walpole, Westwood, and you know, we're all looking to get bodies in. At 19 sworn, every single time one of my officers takes a day off, it creates a backfill, a vacancy in order to staff. So my junior officers, I actually had it at 40. They actually are entitled to 43 days off in the chorus. They are entitled to 43 days off. I'm sorry, 1 second.
No problem.
Heather knows how she feels. It's just he has to give to me a bottle.
Yeah, I appreciate the frustrations that she goes through.
Hi, sorry, I'm back. Thank you. My daughter just walked in, so obviously the hound dogs had to make sure I was safe. Okay, I lost my train of thought. Where were we?
I think you were talking about staffing frustrations and just in general, I mean, you know, you were mentioning some of the surrounding towns and their who you compete with. Are they all on, do they have civil service or are they out of civil service or?
So for the surrounding towns, Holliston, Sherburne, Dover, Millis, Walpole, they are not civil service.
Wow, okay. Okay.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I'm a neophyte on the committee, chief. I totally understand what you're saying. Well, I understand that you're saying it's a problem. Why is having civil service a problem vis-a-vis being not in civil service?
So it limits our candidate pool. It tells us who we have to hire. It was a fantastic thing back in the 60s and 70s when becoming a police officer was a highly sought after profession. You would get a number of candidates from within your own town. We've seen that number dwindle down. This last pooling that we did, when I requisitioned a list, I didn't have a single candidate from town signed for the list. So then instead of having candidates that actually want to police in a particular area, we're getting fed a list of candidates that just want to become police officers and not so much specific to Medfield. So we're an opportunity for them to get sponsored attend academy, and then leave as a fully trained officer, and they get picked up very easily by other departments. We used to be able to hold on to a civil service status, but now there are so many agencies that are not part of civil service that I can have an officer leave and just go to another department, and there's nothing we can do to prevent that.
So Chief, what's the cost of, if somebody comes on and we pay for them to go to the academy to get all this training, and then a year later, they say they want to leave, what's that cost the town?
So the uniform costs are roughly $5,000 alone. We pay for the 6 months of training and then 2 months of FTO. So that's a full salary at step one. During that time, we also pay $3,000 for the academy. It runs us about another $1,500 to $2,000 for the ammunition just to have them train, wear and tear in the police vehicle that we have to send to EVOC. So, and then we have to backfill that position while they're away at the academy. So ultimately, we're looking at, roughly a salary of $60,000 plus the academy fees and uniform fees.
Wow.
Chief, I expect that you'll say that there's a union reason why what I'm about to say won't work. But could the town say, yeah, look, we're prepared to enter into this agreement to send you to the academy, pay for your uniform, do all this training, et cetera, but in consideration of that, we'd really like a commitment that when you're done with the training, you'll work here for 2 years. Something like that. Is that permitted or not?
So we do have something in place where we basically make them pay back part of the academy, and then at the end of 3 years, they can get that money back. But we found that $3,000, so we have an obligation to uniform them and pay their salary. They're doing a job, we're paying their salary for it. The $3,000 that is costed out and charged to the recruit, they don't care if they leave it for. Typically, if they're leaving, they're going someplace to get a raise, and they're getting picked up by other agencies who now don't want to have that expense.
So Chief, this has to be negotiated with the union in order to get out of this civil service program?
I'm gonna defer that to Christine.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know how far we can talk about this.
I think I'd like to stop right now.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah.
That's okay. Yeah,
Okay.
we're in the process of negotiating the contract now. So once we've signed the MOU, I'll have more liberty to talk more about that.
Okay, so it's part of the negotiations.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Chief, I think there's one item in, just to close off is, you have a couple of items that are, I think up for grant. I think you mentioned, is it the tasers and the, and the communications? Or that, maybe I'm mixing two things there actually, but,
You are mixing two things. So tasers, we just got a bit of good news today. We thought we were going to have to replace our tasers. It's a very, very significant cost. We are able to not do that at this time. So we'll be able to budget a little bit better for that as we move down the road. It's kicking a can, but it's a can we can kick. We do get three significant grants that kind of help us. We get these pretty consistently. We have a power phone grant. This is the training system that trains all of our officers in dispatch in E911 and EMD. All of our officers are cross-trained. So in the event that we have a catastrophic or unusual event in town, we can pull to have a second dispatcher on the desk. Or if one of our dispatchers gets ill, we can cover that with an officer. That grant comes in at about $40,000 a year. It's flexible. It basically pays for all of our training and overtime for training. We have the Med Project, which is our drug turn-in program. We get about $2,500 a year just to assist with the manpower required to keep that and make sure that we're destroying the drugs properly. And then we have a bulletproof vest grant through EOPS. And that's roughly each of our officers gets a vest every 5 years. They're running right now between $1,100 and $1,200. So it's a nice offset for us.
great.
Jeremy or Jillian, do you have any questions or comments or?
I had a couple, but I think one I can't ask yet. But I had a question on the pavement marking budget. Seeing that some of that work may be done internally at Public Works, has there been any thought of just putting that, instead of having that its own cost center, but just putting that budget within the Public Works budget as a line item for pavement marking?
I'll be honest, I'm actually surprised and befuddled as to why it's in my budget to begin with. You know, I'm certainly
Just
not.
historical things that I can't change yet.
I know. Listen, whenever we get questions on the line markings, I actually call Mo because he's the person who has the answer, and then he feeds it to me. I do think that he is going to take some of those costs. I know it's a transition that we would both love to see happen, but for now, it stays with me.
The next Mike Sullivan seance. We'll get
I'm working on it.
Chief, there seems to be a bit of a sort of a lot of interest in moving towards a regional dispatch for public safety. Do you see any potential benefit there for Medfield in the future?
I think it's like anything else, and thank you for asking that. You know, there are pros and cons to both. So obviously you get a better qualified dispatcher simply because of the repetition. When they're at a call center, they're just fielding more calls, so they get more experience. I think we have a terrific dispatch staff and they do extremely well for kind of the limitations on calls that we have. I think that I don't necessarily know that there's a cost savings for me personally. I think in a town like Medfield, people want to be able to access the police station and speak to an officer or a person at the window. We get a number of people that come in because they would like to speak to somebody in person or turning in an LTC or seeking a report. So I think it's something we would still have to man. You know, the cons of it is, does the public feel as though they've lost something in terms of that community feeling, that community policing, that when they call, they're talking to somebody that's in town. When they say Hinkley Pond, the person doesn't have to say, what street is that? They know where Hinkley Pond is. I'm not going to lie, it took me 3 years to figure out why Parks and Rec was called the FAF Center. So, you know, there is some historical and institutional knowledge that stays with us when we keep our people in-house. So I'm prepared to really do whatever the town wants to do. And I think I'm not trying to defer your answer or to not answer you, but I think that has to be a community decision. You know, we can tell them all the benefits of having a more qualified dispatcher, but if people don't feel like they're getting that personalized touch and they don't want it, then I think we have to respect that, you know, as an agency and make sure that we're delivering the services that the community wants.
Thanks, Chief.
I wonder if there's like a hybrid type model for that where you do have somebody during the daytime, you know, at the station in case somebody, a resident wants to come in, but you know, at night, maybe you go to a regional type. I don't know if that's done at all, but.
I do think that you're going to see, because the state has obviously thrown some money behind this and there's grant funding for it. I think that it is probably coming. You know, do we get in front of that? Do we wait and see? I do think it's a town decision and one that certainly we would have to get input from the community on. The only thing I don't like about it, some agencies are going to putting like a TV monitor or a phone where it picks up and it will dial an officer to come in off the street. I just, you know, from just like I said, a community policing perspective, you lose something there. You lose just a little bit of that kind of personal touch.
We were part of a study, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago. We were part of a 6-town regionalization study to look at dispatch. We were not recommended to form this group that the 6 towns wanted to. And so we are looking at various other options. Our biggest hurdle was getting through civil service and this police negotiation. Once we get through that, we'll start taking another look at it.
And I do have to say, just to put a human element on it, I have, you know, 4 dispatchers that do a fantastic job. And obviously, I'd be remiss if I wasn't considering what their future and their future employment look like. And I think that's got to be part of the conversation, with my organization as well.
Mhm. Okay, any other questions, comments for the chief?
All set. Chief, thanks once again.
Thank you. I know you had a tough, difficult year, so thank you for everything you do.
And I guess understand you're on your way for a little trip, so hopefully you'll be well rested when you come back. It'll all be here.
Yes, I am. Thank you. And you know what? We had a difficult year, but we are going in the right direction, and that's a good thing.
Good.
Appreciate it. Thanks
Great.
very much. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see Chief Carico's online. You want to promote him? There you go.
You're right there.
There he is. Chief Carico, good evening. You're on mute.
Hi, how we doing?
Good evening, Chief. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Well, before we get started, I'll give you the floor, but just want a quick introduction for the committee. The Chief Carico has been with us, I believe, since May of 2018, I think is
Correct.
At the time when he joined the department, we had 8 full-time plus the chief, and we are now at 13. And I'll let another chief will give the details and background on staffing. The big increase, or the increase that went from the 8 or the 9 to 13 is in the area of the ALS, which I would think if people remember from the town meeting, that was a discussion item. And want to add that the revolving fund this year and in the budget is anticipated to return $245,000 out of the ALS revolving fund to contribute to the expenses of the department. So that's been a revenue generator in that respect. Another significant improvement area since Chief Carico joined us is in the area of capital improvements. We had the fire trucks and other equipment that was needed to be replaced. And through the work with the department and the town and the Warrant Committee and the Capital Budgeting Committee, those items have been addressed, and if there are other. So this year's capital requirement or request is certainly much lower and modest, and I'll let the chief address that as well. The department budget is about 13% of the town's operating budget. So again, another significant element to the town. And this year's budget reflects a 3.8% increase of about 63,185, which is all entirely fire and rescue salary, which is increasing 4.7%, and does reflect the collective bargaining agreement that the fire department is under, and maybe the chief can address that as well. The salaries comprise 89% of the fire budget, operating budget. So again, a significant piece there. One item that I did hand out, Chief, is the list and the statistics that you had provided. So if you want to address that when I give you the floor here in a moment. And the second item is, which I think is really noteworthy, that over the time since you've been leading the department, almost $600,000 of grants have been awarded to the department. And I handed out the detail that you have on that. That's been significant. And I know that there's a grant that you're working on right now that you want to address as well, but it's a significant achievement and contribution to the town, the grants that you've been able to secure. So with that introduction, I'll give you the floor and
Okay, but you're gonna have to excuse me because you guys are skipping, the video is skipping and the audio is skipping a little bit, so if I start skipping, let me know. Roughly, I have a 29-man department. We run about 1,400 calls a year, with 60% of that being medicals. Obviously, as Bob had said, back in 2018, we switched over to the ALS level, and it's been working well. We have definitely blown away the budgeted numbers. I think originally it was 150,000 was expected to be made, and we're far exceeding that. For fiscal year 24, I'm looking for around 63,000 is what Bob had said. And a lot of it has to do with contractual obligations. I've also added some time for outside fire prevention. My fire prevention officer is Bill DeKing, and Bill has to do some inspections that he cannot do when he's on duty, so he has to come in on overtime. There were a lot of details that weren't covered that I was just covering within the numbers I had, but EMS graduation detail, town meeting details, Norfolk Tech Rescue trailer deployments, the touch a truck event, and we've had a rather significant increase in sick time, which obviously because of the flus and COVID virus, it's been impacting the department. There were some increases to longevity for 6 members, vacation time increased. They now have certification pay, and then some overtime numbers were added for holdovers. Bob had talked about some of the stats that I had given him. So basically we're on track. We go up and down about 100 calls depending on the year and what's happening. So we're on average of 1405 is what we have right now. We're providing mutual aid more than we receive it. So that was a huge change from several years ago. If you remember, we had outside agencies providing ALS, and they were in town all the time. And now they're, now it's the opposite. So now we are the ones providing mutual aid more than we're receiving it. I have been rather successful with grants. The SAFER grant for 4 firefighters came out today. It came out at 8 o'clock, and it was finished and written and submitted by 3 o'clock. So I've just written a $1.1 million grant for staffing. Potentially we could hire 4 additional firefighters, and we'll see what happens. Last week I wrote a grant for $90,000 to replace all the hoses in the department, and those will be coming out probably by the end of the year. We'll see where we are.
Chief, can you give a little bit, could you give a little bit more detail on that SAFER grant that you just mentioned? Because I think it's, I think it's for it's a staffing for a second ambulance, I believe. And,
yeah, so
and it covers, and also just to finish, the 1.1 million is for a period of time, and then the town takes it on. Is that just a little color on that, please?
Yeah, so about September, it might have been October, I made A2 ALS. So now we have 2 ALS ambulances. It actually transported today. So both of our trucks were on the road ALS. I had one firefighter that has moved to town who's a paramedic, and he came back, and with that person living in town, I'm able to deploy 2 ALS ambulances. We still have the problem of you need 4 people to run 2 ambulances. So the SAFER grant comes out once a year, and it offers to municipalities the opportunity to hire firefighters. And it's structured around firefighting. So it's structured around having 4 firefighters and an engine to respond. Because of the amount of jobs that we have to do when we have a building fire, basically they structure it around that. One of the side benefits is the 60% of our volume is medical calls. So I can hire firefighter paramedics, and we can get that second ALS ambulance on the air. So this grant will provide 4 firefighters for 3 years Their full salary paid for by the federal government. So the only thing that we have to pay for is clothing, firefighting gear, and any overtime that they make. I've also put in for their benefits, the VFIS numbers that we charge for every firefighter. I figured it down to the individual, so I've put in for all of those expenditures. So it's basically you get the full payment of 4 firefighters for 3 years, and then at the end of the 3 years, you can either pick them up or you can lay them off. It all depends on what your policy is and what your financial position is at the end of the 3 years. They are fully trained. It basically gives you everything you need. You get the people. So did I answer that question, Bob?
Yeah, I did, and I think that maybe we just had as you know, Chief Garrett was on prior to this, and we had a significant, a lot of our talk was about staffing and the availability of personnel in the town. And so maybe you can address with that, when you talk about your staffing, you include the call firefighters as well. But I know that that's kind of a changing environment, and maybe you can address that in terms of future needs and future performance with the staffing.
Yeah, it's right now we have there's 13 full-time employees, including myself, and then there's another. I had 16 call firefighters. I think I've dropped down now to 14 because one has not been coming back at all due to a medical reason, and another one has left the department. So I'm at 14 right now. And back in August of 2022, I did a presentation where I was listing out the response times or the response numbers for some of these employees. And I have basically my 5 heavy hitters who come back to 59% or more of the calls. Because I basically, out of those 14 people, I have 5 that are coming back, fairly significantly. And then it drops off to another 5 that are hitting a little less than 50%. And then I have 5 that are less than 6%. I track everything in the department. I track how many responses everyone does. It's just one of the things I do. And there has been a slight increase. I just ran the numbers again this morning, but I'm still running that. Of the 14 call firefighters that I have on the books that are active, they're running about 34% of the responses. So you have to remember, you're taking the overall number of recalls that we've done. So basically we've done 116 box alarms, and then you'll get the one kid that lives in town and really doesn't have much going on, so he can show up to 90% of them. And then you get the people that go to work, Monday through Friday, and they're not available. And then if they have something going on the weekend, they're not available. And we've experienced that quite a bit, especially during the week when we have these double hits or we have fire alarms and I'm getting one person back. So it becomes problematic for me because then depending on what the incident is, I have to staff according to what's happening. So if I put a recall out there and I don't get anyone back, then I have to go to plan B, which is that I start tapping into the surrounding towns and asking them for help. Right now, it's a situation that many departments are experiencing. It's basically bring people on the call force, and they slowly leave or they want to go and become full-time firefighters. And you have that small group that has 30 years as a call firefighter, and basically they'll do it until they're 65 and then they have to leave. But you get some younger people in that as they mature and life happens and they get married and have kids and their time isn't as much, it becomes a problem if you're you still have to run emergency calls and you still need people to do those calls. So it's just a constant battle, and at some point you have to say, okay, well, I need firefighter paramedics who can work on the ambulance and provide ALS care to somebody having a heart attack. And today it worked out fine because we had a medical call where A1 went to a stroke. And then we had another medical for a syncopal episode at the school. One of the teachers basically became extremely dizzy and blood pressure crashed, and we were able to take care of that person too. So the system worked the way it was supposed to. And then both ambulances transported to Newton Wellesley, and luckily nothing else happened, and they were back in service, and life went on. So
Well, that's good. I have a question. So the 21 FTEs that is in the 24 budget request, right? So it's full 21 full-time equivalents in the FY.
It's 13.
13.
Okay.
Okay. I have 13 full-time employees. It's 12 on the operational line, including myself, is 13.
Okay, so that $63,000 increase is, none of that's additional people. It's all contractual obligations for existing people.
Correct. It's
Okay.
all delivering the service that the town expects me to deliver.
Okay,
But it's good, but it's related to the
Salary, in majority of
collective,
it's
the
salary,
collective
overtime
bargaining,
and
not
recall.
incremental heads. Correct.
non-incremental,
Right.
that's what I wanted. to make sure.
Yeah, it's
When he uses numbers sometimes,
Yep.
just to clarify, when he uses numbers, sometimes he includes
The on-call.
the on-call.
Yeah,
right?
okay, yeah. I wrote down 21, I don't know why, but, okay. Right. And what about capital? Are there any capital requests this year?
Yeah, I have, actually, I'm drawing a complete blank on my capital requests. I believe I had,
I have
firefighting
them up,
gear.
Chief.
No,
If you'd like me to share my screen, I have the capital stuff
yeah,
up.
that would be great, because I completely went, eventually you guys can come, and visit me in the memory care unit, because I can't remember anything right now.
Just 1 minute.
I have about $15,000 for a foam system for engine 3. Back when I originally purchased engine 3 was the first engine that we replaced. Because I bought demo units, it didn't come with a foam system. And then the next year when I bought engine 2, I was able to get a foam system on that engine. So what I like to do is I like to make both trucks exactly the same. And but purchasing the foam system and having it installed will make both of those trucks exactly the same.
And that's foam, FOAM, not PHONE.
Yeah, foam.
Thanks for clarifying that. I was like, those are
I
expensive.
could see some of them looking at one, what's gonna put a phone in the?
Right, sounds like Frank is gonna share some screen here. Here we go. Can you see that, chief?
Yeah, and the other item. Yeah, was the structural firefighting gear, which I'm also going to try to go for a grant for next year. So hopefully we'll be able to take care of that one also, but we'll see. I tried to keep it pretty limited this year. Obviously you have the engine 3 payment. And then portable radios shouldn't be on there at all, because portable radios went away.
I just have them listed as I kept them on just to note that there was a grant funding them.
Okay, yeah, which was like $94,000, but I still needed the money because of the price of the radios had gone up from, that was what was appropriated last year. But we're good with portable radios now. We won't need any for about 25 years, so.
So help me out with the engine 3, the total project cost on that, and then the FY24 request. Why is there a difference there?
The FY24 is the payment for that.
Oh, it's leased.
Yeah.
It's a lease payment, correct.
Okay, thank you. What is that, like a 10-year lease?
10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 10-year lease.
Okay.
And chief, I just think that, we spoke, but there were actually 3 rather significant events this year for your department, right? In terms of 2 house fires and the fire that was up in Rocky Woods.
Yeah, we've, kind of out of the ordinary. Usually we'll have one house fire every 18 months or so, but we actually had 2 significant house fires within a 30-day period. We also had a rather significant brush fire for 2 days out behind the water treatment plant. And then we spent 2 additional days up at Rocky Woods with a very small fire. It was only 1.5 acres, but because of the location of it, it took probably about 28 hours to put it out. So that was several rather significant events for us. And the one at Rocky Nooks, actually, it took a lot of mutual aid because I ended up calling a brush truck strike team, and I called for a structural task force, or a forest fire task force. So what that does is it provides so many pieces of equipment and engine for water supply. It gives me tankers, so it gives me a lot of flexibility. So it was just a very, very difficult fire to fight. And luckily, right as we were leaving on the last day at Rocky Woods, it started raining. So that was something that I look forward to.
Good. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. I appreciate, we all appreciate the work that you and your department do, and those were significant events this year.
A question
No,
for
thank you.
Christine. That fire engine 3, it's the funding source is tax levy, local receipts.
Mhm.
Is that what we normally do?
Yes, it's included on your fiscal year 24 budget work. You'll see it right under the debt and interest.
Okay.
Any more questions for the chief? Good.
No, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks once again, chief. Appreciate all you do, and to your team.
All right, thank you.
And I did have the chance on, was it last summer or last fall, and when you had the open house one evening, and your whole team was really informative, but the kids going around eating the pizza and working in the fire gear was a great sight. So thanks for that.
Oh, no problem. We're gonna do that again.
No, I lost it.
Oh, well.
Okay, well,
Sorry about that.
okay, that was Christine who did that.
Sorry.
All right.
Good, thank you.
Get used to it.
I guess, Yvonne, you ready? You wanna?
So mine's really boring compared to the last two.
But you're very important.
Okay, so I think I'll go over my budget. I haven't met you. I'm Yvonne Remillard. I'm the assessor. I've been here in Medfield now for 8 years. Prior to that, I was in Sherburne for 20. So I have 12 years left here, and then I'm gone.
You're gonna outlive
Can't
me.
go back to Sherburne.
You can't have it. I'm retired after that. So when I first started, I had just a brief from my office. I had our administrative assistants. One of them retired after about 1.5 years, and Christine and I worked to reorganize the office. So in the office is myself, one of the administrative assistants that works in the office is 37.5 hours, and then I now have, actually for 5 years now, I have a 20-hour data collector. So she helps me with permits and my inspections, as well as working in the office. So I'm very fortunate to have her because she's also, besides working for me, she is also a real estate appraiser. So it's very helpful for my office. So segueing into that, my budget. So the only thing that I really is increasing a lot this year in my budget is a raise for my 20-hour person. She has gotten her accreditation, and she is also working to learn more about my job in case something happens to me, that she can take over in the interim of finding somebody, or possibly, just doing the job yourself. So that is our succession plan with her. So, that's why the salary hasn't increased. The longevity is just for, the 2 employees that get the additional $50. The rest of my budget, I'll go over very quickly. It's pretty self-explanatory. The dues and memberships, what I do is, I don't really know if they go up every year. They don't tell you until that year. So I just budget for what I spend the prior year. So this year, I spent $810, so that's what I'm requesting for next year, and that's up $90. Following is our training and education. I'm leaving that the same at 1,500. The 5,000 for the consultant is our mapping budget, our GIS with CAI. We have a contract with them. The building inspector, his department also benefits from this, as well as the planner. My registry fees are $250. I'm keeping that the same. That's if I need official printing from them. Postage, I raised $100. I haven't increased that for a while. And the postage just increased again this year, so that's why I'm raising that. I do also have a gentleman that does some cyclical inspections for us. And that's that line at 3,000, I'm leaving that the same. I have 2 contracts with Patriot Properties. They service our personal property accounts as well as assist with our commercial appraising. With our commercial appraising, we have to do 2 valuations. We have to do an income model and we have to do a market rate model for the state. And they have all of the surrounding data. So it's very helpful to have them. So that's a contract, a 5-year contract for both of those, and they both end in fiscal 25, which will be our recertification year. Meetings and conferences, self-explanatory, I'm leaving that the same at 500, and my office supplies I'm leaving at 800. So basically my expenses are up $190 from last year, and my salary is up about 3,000 for my assistant. Do you have any questions?
I know, we certainly appreciate you, managing your budget. So that was very appreciative, so.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments on that? That sounds pretty straightforward. Yeah, for sure.
Do you get much feedback from the town people in terms of the assessments and then this is?
Oh, no. Especially when it's in the paper.
Yeah.
No, there is a fair number of people that call about their assessments. A lot of the new people that move from out of state will call, especially if they're moving from a state that does not value property at full and fair cash value. We have a lot of residential exemption questions. We don't have that here. So we do have a lot of different questions besides just honor value.
Well, I assumed that your job is more than just looking at these numbers, and I was just curious what that feedback is and what the just kind of the overall tenor of the town is.
Yeah, no, most people, once they understand the process, and all of our assessments are online. You can go on, you can look at your house, you can make sure all the data that we have is correct. Some people will call and say, you have me listed for 4 bedrooms and I only have 3. I'm like, okay, well, it's based on square footage. So I answer their question. So a lot of it is education. Once you get beyond that point, people look up their information. They might look up people that they think are comparable to them and that they understand, where the process is. I don't have too many complaints. As far as filing for abatements, in my presentation, we'll look at last year's. So there's not, it's more education. You do have some people that aren't happy, but it is their pocketbook. And so you understand that. But more people get very angry over the excise tax, believe it or not.
Really?
Yes, your car tax. Which is, I'll briefly talk about that if you don't know. It's state mandated, so whether you live here, or you live in Millis, you live in Boston, it's all the same. You're gonna pay the same tax, because it's based on the car that you own and how old the car is. So a lot of people don't like that, they get angry, they're like, I don't have this car anymore. So we don't know that they don't have the car anymore if it's still registered.
Right.
So you may have sold your car, but you didn't cancel your plate, the registry still thinks you have it, so we don't know any different. So this is process to file an abatement. So we get more angry people over the excise tax, I would have to say, than the real estate tax. But there are over 13,000 excise tax bills in Medfield.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more bills.
Yeah,
That's a lot of cars.
that's a car person.
Yeah, it is, so. Do you want to, you were also, I think, going to cover, the revenue side of, things?
Well, I was just gonna do, I wasn't really too sure what you were looking at. Frank and I talked about it, and I was just gonna do a little presentation on values and growth.
Yeah.
And then how that leads into the levy limit and the tax rate recap.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because every year, it's always good to educate ourselves on that, so.
Yeah, and if there's
and-
something that I don't touch on the presentation, you just feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
And let me know. I'm happy to answer anything else.
Okay.
And as we go too, I think what we'll do, I think Frank is gonna share my presentation. And then I think I'll take questions after maybe each section. If you have a question, you can stop me.
Mhm.
All right, so, okay, Frank.
Are you able
You
to see
will.
my screen?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
see it, yeah.
Okay.
Did you want to go to the next slide? or-
Yeah.
Okay,
I
go to the
can-
first slide, yeah.
Oh, wait, you're in group. All right, so assessed values is the, all right, so
Sorry.
assessed values. So on the next page, I think you all have the presentation here, but these are my talking.
They don't have the
points.
presentation.
Oh, you don't have a presentation?
No.
Oh, okay. So sorry about that. You have to look at.
We'll
this.
get you a copy of it.
Yeah, okay. All right, so the total town values are submitted after the sales have been approved by the DOR. So our first step before we get to the tax rate is to have our sales approved. Once we do that, we can submit our total town assessed values. On the next slide, I'll show you all the, it's the summary by their class and their land use codes. We have to adjust our valuation schedules if there has been a change in the market every year. So this past year for fiscal year 13, the property valuations reflect full and fair cash value as of January 1st, 2022. So what that means is calendar year 21 sales, January to December, those sales were used to formulate the values for fiscal 23. So right now I'm looking at 22 sales to value fiscal 24. Okay, so that's how it is. So we are always a year behind. So if you have a sudden drop in the market, your assessments aren't going to reflect that. All right. If you have a sudden huge increase, your values aren't going to reflect that because we're about a year or so behind. Does that make sense? Now, and these are all state guidelines. This isn't a Medfield rule. This is everywhere in the state. These are the dates we have to use. So these values, again, must be approved before we can submit new growth. So Frank, you want to go to the next slide? All right, so here you can't really see it too well. I'm sorry, I don't have the presentation, but the first column is the number of parcels for each land use code. So the top one says 101, and that's for single family. And then it goes down 102, that's for condos. 103 and 109, that's for a multi-house. We don't have any 103s, those are mobile homes. 104 is two family, 105 is three family, and it goes on down. The 300s are commercial, 400s are industrial, then of course the chapter land, which is considered commercial. And then the 500s are personal property. So within each category, that's the total value that falls within that category. Does that make sense? And at the very bottom in the corner, it'll give you the total value that's appear later. Okay, Frank. Well, does anybody have any questions on this slide?
So those are the values of the sales. during that year?
No, the
The
total town,
total value for the total town,
the total town values, right?
okay.
Yeah,
So-
so the assessed value is over like $3.2 billion of all the categories, yeah,
So the house next door is sold,
3.4, I should say.
and my house is the same as the house next door. And it sells for X.
Mhm.
Does my house get valued at X as well?
Might.
Well, I mean, that's the relationship,
It's
right?
a relationship, yes.
Right.
We would use that sale in your neighborhood
Mhm.
to develop the values within your neighborhood. But we have to look at all the sales in your neighborhood too. And it also depends on house type. There's a lot of factors.
Sure,
that go
but I
into
mean, but
that.
there is a correlation between,
Yes.
Is it based on sales per square foot?
Well, if the sales are based on a lot of things,
Well,
it's,
right.
it's square foot's an issue, depreciation, age of your home, and then there's the type of your home, all the
Yeah.
factors that go into that, the land, there's a lot of factors that go in. If you look at your card online, all of those factors that are listed kind of go into what we use to develop the sales, the values. We do mass appraisal, which is different than when an appraiser comes out to do your house, your individual house. They're gonna use 3 or 4 sales that have taken place recently. We have to use a calendar year of sales, and we have to develop it for the masses. We have to use all the sales and then adjust our tables so that it correlates with a giant group. So it's more individualized when you have like a mortgage one done or you're buying a house or
Right.
whatever. But typically, our values using the mass appraisal system and a mortgage sale, whatever, though we come in range of each other. So we should be close.
But this is done through every municipality in the state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's general laws to use mass appraisal. Mhm. Okay, yeah, so these are all the values throughout town. Instead of just the sales. Okay, all right, great. So the next thing that we submit is the new growth. And people often ask, what exactly is new growth? So this is how it's defined by the DOR. So real or personal property that is subject to taxation for the first time. So it's new. So a new personal property account, like the electric chargers by the bank, that's a new personal property account. Or something that was previously exempt, like the Legion, that was exempt and now it's the apartment building off of Peter Christoph Way. So new growth can also be taxed as a separate parcel for the first time. So that would be new subdivisions, new lots, new condo conversions. So I give another example, Henry Way, that was a single family home. Now we have apartment buildings and we have 12 condos. New growth can also be an increase in value over the prior year as long as it's not due to a market change. So that would be if you added an addition, if you built a garage, if you added a pool, finished your basement, something like that. That's a physical change to your property that was not because of market changes. So new growth is calculated until June 30th. So that's why I cannot give you an exact number. I am still out there until June 30th. Collecting data to develop the new growth number. So I give you an estimate. I give you an estimate based on the past. I give you an estimate based on permits that I've seen of things that I know that are coming into town. The other thing with new growth too is personal property is very hard to judge. Our form of lists, if we call them, those are the personal property. The business owners have to report their property. They have until March 1st to give me that, and a lot of them are very late. And so they can flow in April and May. Our utilities do not come in until May 15th, and then they come in again until June 15th. So there's no way that I could ever have an exact number for you by the time we have our town meeting the first Monday in May. So the new growth summary sheet, that's on the next page, will again show the amount of growth in each category. We have to I mean, that's residential, commercial and industrial, which are on the next page, but this is just a little example of how we have to calculate new growth, because it is. The difference multiplied by last year's tax rate. So this is just an example. The prior year's value was 500,000. Somebody put an addition on. Their new value is 600. The difference is 100. So I take that 100 difference, multiply it by last year's tax rate, and that property added 1742 out of our 611. 611,000. So so I keep a spreadsheet like this. It's a little bit more detailed than this because it's got all the property details and exactly what the growth was, if it was an addition or a garage or whatever it was. And then that spreadsheet is also reported to the Department of Revenue. And then we categorize it, and that's how we come up with the next sheet, Frank. So this is the new growth spreadsheet that I submit to the Department of Revenue. So you can see on there, and sorry, you can't see it very well. It's split up by, again, kind of like the values, it's split up by the different categories. So like the top line is single family. So I'll read that off to you. So the single family, the valuation was 16,337,000. And then it goes down the line. So in each category, again, it's the total value times the last year's tax rate, and this past year for 23 was 611,675. So that number. So just bear in mind that that number can always change until we set the tax rate. Does anybody have any questions?
So you're constantly monitoring building permits, and you kind of know,
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
what's happening, and then updating your data based on
Yes.
that. Yeah.
I keep a spreadsheet on the building permits that come in to us, and then I keep another spreadsheet on those permits that will give me growth.
Right.
Okay, so like if you put the solar installation on your house, that's exempt. Okay, but I have to see it and I have to track it. And so it's on one of my permit sheets, but it's not on the other one because there's no growth to it.
Yeah.
And we will come out and see it. So you might see us walking around, or we have to see your solar installation. So, yeah, so I do constantly track permits. The building inspector has the People GIS online, and we are automatically, Diane, my assistant, and I are automatically sent the permits as soon as he commits them, as soon as he approves them, we're sent a copy of them via email. So it's pretty efficient. So I'm going to just draw you back to I know you can't really see it, but it's column A and then column B. Column B is the abatements. Okay, so the prior year abatement values, the total real and personal property abatements were only 12,300 in value. So it was less than $200 that we gave back in abatements last year. So it wasn't that much.
Very good.
We deny a lot. Just FYI.
That's
deny a lot.
overseen by a separate board, right? The Board of Assessors. Do they approve those?
The Board of Assessors approves
Yeah.
those, yes.
Do you have an
Yes.
abatement reserve?
I'm sorry,
Do you have a fund, an abatement reserve?
the overlay.
The overlay.
Yes,
Okay,
so the
that's right, right.
overlay, yeah, the overlay is for abatements and exemptions, okay? This this year was very low. It was very low, but a lot of times too, it's once somebody might come in and file an abatement or might complain a lot, but once you tell them the process and you educate them and they see that it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. All right, so that we go into the levy limit is the next, will be the next screen.
Next slide, Frank.
Okay, so Prop 2.5 provides the town with annual increases. And I'm sorry, if you guys know this already. I wasn't really sure what to put together. I heard there was some new members.
Doing
so
fine.
I'm just kind
You're
of
doing
reviewing
fine.
that stuff.
Great.
Okay, so what it does, it takes last year's levy limit, it adds 2.5 over that limit, then you add on new growth, and then you can add on operational overrides, and this becomes the new fiscal 23 levy limit. So it really isn't 2.5. A lot of people will say to me, why did my property taxes go up more than 2.5? You know, I thought that wasn't supposed to happen. Well, it always can go up 2.5, and then it always can go up new growth. And that is usually like 0.5%. So you're at 3. So, and then if you have operational overrides, that can increase it even more, even though we haven't had those since when, 2018. Was that our 5? I know it was our 5 overrides. Yeah, that was terrible. Okay, so next slide, Frank. So after the levy limit, we have the maximum allowable levy. So we take the fiscal 23 levy limit, and that's where you add on your debt exclusions, your capital exclusions, your stabilization fund overrides, and this becomes your maximum allowable levy. This is what you can spend up to. And then anything that you don't spend, the maximum minus the actual tax levy becomes your excess levy.
So just on the slide for a moment, so, you know, you took you through that first one, the levy limit, right? We have debt exclusions, right? That's all the exempt debt. And that goes down every year unless you add more to it.
Right.
And then the capital exclusions, we don't, well, the stabilization fund override is the municipal stabilization fund. That's the $1 million every year, escalated by 2.5%. Capital stabilization, we had one a couple of years ago, was that right?
The capital exclusions, those are like 1 year.
That's a 1 year type
That's
thing,
1
yeah.
year deal, yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't believe, we've put money into a capital stabilization fund from free cash, but I don't believe it's.
No, that's not what, that would be if you.
This is a separate
Yeah,
tax.
Yeah, if you raised something,
Yeah.
like some communities have raised money to buy an ambulance in a year.
Yeah,
You know, so you put $1 million as a capital exclusion, so it goes on for 1 year and then it's gone.
yeah,
So I like to think of things, this part of the levy limit as, these are not permanent.
Right.
These have an end. And then the other ones before that are permanent. So
Yeah.
an operating override is permanent, whereas a capital exclusion is not.
but you can see that these are fairly, other than the new growth component, they're fairly predictable, right?
Right, so far.
The debt exclusion, we know what that is, we know what the stabilization fund override number is.
Yeah,
So-
if you pull out your fiscal year 24 budget worksheet, that's gonna be the top piece of that worksheet.
Yeah,
If you want some numbers to follow along.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So these are, but, yeah, but, you know, the point is that you can see on this spreadsheet, it's going up, what, $1 million?
$126.
Yeah, 1,126,000. And so, you know, that's, if you just looked at the, you know, the piece without the debt exclusion, right? It's gone up about $1.6 million, right? So really, that's what we have to deal with in terms of additional revenue, you know? So it's, you know, it's a struggle when that's all you're dealt with from a revenue perspective, and we get requests, just the school alone was $1.7 million, let alone the rest of the town, so that's the challenge we have. Yeah.
Okay, Frank, next slide. So the next slide is the levy limit. And so I broke out those two pieces. The first piece is last year's fiscal 22. And then the middle part is the levy limit with the new growth section, and the bottom is the maximum allowable levy. So this is what we submit to the Department of Revenue. So, and we can't do anything until the new growth has been approved. The new growth and the values have to be approved before this can be approved by the commissioner. So. Okay. And then the last section is the tax rate recap. So this is the last thing that we send in, or we send in, I didn't include all the pages, it's the last 4 pages of the recap that we send in for approval from the Department of Revenue after our selectmen's vote. So how did we get here? Well, lots of budget meetings, final budget presentation and voted on at town meeting. Our sales analysis, new growth and new values are approved by the TOR. The finance team, board of assessors, town clerk complete the recap together. The classification is hearing and the selectmen vote to split the rate or not, which they usually don't. In fact, they never have. And then the final documents are submitted to the DOR for the tax rate approval. So the last page is pages are the tax recap. So Frank, if you want to go to the first page. Okay, so on here. I'm sorry. So column D, I should come up there and maybe I'll send it out.
He's got his point.
Okay, yeah, that column right there. Okay, so that's the valuation from by class. So that comes from the values, the first thing I talked about. And then we have our new tax rate. And then it's all divided out by class 1 for residential, commercial, industrial. So Frank.
So that's this is like, it's like a 95% split between commercial and residential.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
And
almost-
then we have $47 million of car values in the town. Is that like?
No, that's personal property.
Personal property.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and a lot of that is the utilities.
Utilities, okay, got it.
Yeah, like Verizon and Algonquin Gas and
Okay.
those things.
Okay.
Okay, all right, Frank, do you want to go to the next page? Okay, so this is the second page of the recap. So just going to point out on here where other things can change. So on here is the revenue part. We've got the state aid, what they give us and then what they take away from us. Is on here. The overlay is on here. The overlay last year was 206,873.74. So this number also changes, and this changes because it's the rounding factor. You have to make the tax rate be just 2 digits. It has to be 1543. If it was just 200,000 that I put in, it would be 1542,865. So they have to make it round.
Mhm.
So what they do is they change the overlay number. So I tell you that I want the overlay to be, or the board voted that the overlay should be 200,000. It's never going to be 200,000 because that's where the rounding happens to make
Got it.
the tax rate work. So that number will change. Then on here too is the local receipts. They can sometimes change. Anything that's not voted and appropriated can change. So the second page is the revenue section. The third page is the third page of the recap is the local receipts. Frank, if you want to go 2 slides. Yeah. Okay. Local receipts. And this, I think, is broken down on there. This is broken down on your
Right,
worksheet.
That's on
Yeah.
this.
So that's how that feeds into the recap. We have to report it all here. The other available funds go on a form called U2. I didn't put this
I
in
think the
here.
local is actually in the binder.
That's right, you gave that, that was one of the
Right.
first things you went over, yeah. Yeah.
So we have to report all of those. If our local receipts, so it's last year's actual and then the estimated. So it was the actual for fiscal 22 on this example and the estimated for 2023. If it's over or under by a certain amount, Andrew has to report why. So we have to be, we have to have a reason.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last page on the tax recap, this is just anything at town meeting, any article that had money in it has to be listed on here.
Mhm.
Anybody have any questions on this?
No,
I just wanted to show how some of those numbers on your worksheet flowed in
Yeah.
here and just, give you a look at what the tax recap looks
Yeah, yeah.
like.
but like on local receipts, that's, you're budgeting like $146,000 increase
Mhm.
in the 24 budget versus 23. The recap for 23, so.
Yeah, the local receipts, they haven't changed that much.
And then, of course, the wild card is the state aid and what's gonna happen there. We won't know that for another,
Governor's budget is due March 1st.
yeah. Right.
Very good.
That was very informative. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
I'm sorry you didn't have the sheets.
We'll get your copy. Frank, looking on it right now.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it very much, and thank you for
Very
everything you do. All right. I think, now, what were these two handouts? Fire department.
Yeah. Fire and police
Okay,
statistics.
so I think we're through all the departments. Today at least, and I don't know if there's so many informational items people wanted to cover. Anything you wanted to cover, Bob, or
What you want
I
to?
know,
You have
I
the,
know Mather might
you
give
have
an
the free
update.
cash, you have this, Christine.
Oh, that's right, we have free cash. Before we get
The
to
free
that.
cash memo is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to go to
bring- you should bring that.
Any questions about that? We're available to answer them. And this is the memo we put together the last couple of years. You'll see a lot of the information is similar in there as what you've seen in your past, and really just explains to you. There's always some confusion as to what free cash is versus stabilization. I really hate they call it free cash. It's not free. So if there's any questions about this, we're happy to answer them.
I did have a question on this, under the principal and interest, and this is in the memo, the principal and interest, we talk about this municipal purpose loan bond, which was issued back in 2007, 2010. And it's I guess we refinanced it, right? Is that what happened? George?
We did a refunding.
Refunding, yeah, we refunded it. Was that exempt debt, or was that just, what
I
was that
believe it
for?
was, I think we had both, I think it was both, yeah, to be honest with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then the other question I had was about the unemployment compensation. There's a discussion about some fraudulent unemployment claims that were made against the town.
Yeah, the first two files were, I filed for unemployment and so did Dr. Marsden. It was news to me. I was worried that somebody knew something I didn't.
Are you serious? You're
I'm
serious?
dead serious. Yes,
This is a huge problem. all over.
huge. Yes,
My wife had it too.
yeah,
So during COVID, it was at an all-time high.
yeah.
And we were advised to pay for the claims and then they would go in and reverse them, which is what happened. So we had probably like a $70,000 credit after COVID and after all the claims finally died down. And that credit has really gotten us through, I want to say probably August or September of fiscal year 23. So.
When did we pay that?
It was during COVID.
21 and 22.
21,
Fiscal year
22,
21,
okay.
22.
We just had one come up this week.
Another one?
Right, we had
Yeah,
another
fraudulent
one,
one.
yeah, so they are starting up again. But I believe it was fiscal year 22 that we did not take the appropriation.
We did not.
That we budgeted for unemployment, because we take the appropriation and we put it into our trust fund.
Mhm.
We pay our own claims. But because of that credit, we didn't need the money, so that money flowed into free cash.
How do you catch it? How do you?
Yeah.
Are you still advised to pay this?
We were at the height of COVID, we had to pay it.
Or what about now? What about this new one that just,
Now it's,
Okay.
it's so different now.
yeah, okay.
Well, this is a huge deal in Congress right now. I mean, I see
Oh,
that, yeah, I mean, you're reading about it all the time, they're going after it.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to make light of it when I was joking about Jeff and I, because we did have to go through and file police reports, we did have to go through and
Oh
file.
my God,
And put, credit watches on everything, so it was,
that messes your personal life up pretty bad.
Yeah, it's just, one more thing you have to be on the lookout.
So you're
for.
catching an employee name and you're saying, oh, this isn't, wow, they're at work, this doesn't jive. Oh, okay, so it's because you know the employee list.
But somebody submitted it and they got, some person got paid, right? Is it ever possible to find out who that is?
Not that I know.
So how does it work? Someone says, I'm Christine Trueweiler, I'm filing and
They
send the
file-
money to this account.
Yeah, basically.
And then by the time you find out it's fraudulent, the money's gone.
If somebody gets your social security number and they get
It was
your,
happening everywhere
Yeah.
during COVID.
We had a significant number of employees that
It's
were.
happening everywhere. And you have to remember, I mean, between the town and the school, we know who is going to be filing unemployment.
Right,
We know who's coming, we know who's going. We're fortunate that we're small enough and we know where everybody is and if anybody's leaving. So the one that just came across the other day, we knew was not.
so that's how you're recognizing it.
Right.
They got a lot of organization, they're not.
Right.
Okay.
The only other question I had was, it looked to me like all the turnbacks on the schedule, unless I missed it, I could have missed it, were expensive. What about revenue? Is there any turnback on the revenue? Like local receipts or,
This is just other budgets, right?
Yeah, this is with the budget turnback.
yeah,
So revenue, we did
Revenue
have-
is, we got more than we were expecting. right?
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I
And
meant.
that's how, so that's how that additional money ends up in free cash as well. So we had
But is
additional
there a-
state aid. No, I can get that for you though.
Okay,
The state aid name, specifically, it was actually, and this never happens, it was higher on the unrestricted, government aid, because we had the governor's budget, and then we had the House budget, and then they went back, and because the revenues were so high at the state, they did increase local towns, state aid, but not chapter 7, just the unrestricted
Yeah.
local government aid.
I mean, you talk about local receipt revenues, but I didn't see a number on the schedule for it.
No, we can give you, this is just a listing of the individual budget turnback. I can give you what the state aid.
We know we had a budget for it.
Yeah.
We got more than that.
You can see what I can do is I can give you I can pull this together for you for last year and you can see what we estimated for revenues. And then you'll see when it says per recap, it's what Yvonne just went through.
Yeah.
So if you look at what this looks like in the warrant report, it'll have all the estimated revenues. And then the new budget worksheet this year has per the recap and those are the actuals.
Okay,
So we can pull that together for you.
okay.
I'll use the umbrella of, we have new people on the committee, but it's also for me, because can you go over a little bit of each one of these appendix and why they're significant and what we should get from them? Like, just maybe explain the process.
Significant ones, right?
Well, yeah, just not even individually, but just kind of the turn back process and everybody know what it is and how it.
So, when we get to the end of the fiscal year, the turn back for these individual, budgets, and you see the department on the left-hand side, this is what's remaining in the budget that was not spent. And I can go through each one. I probably have to refresh my memory on a few of them as to why we didn't, spend it, but for the most part, I think the department heads, on the town and the school side have always been, trustworthy is not the word I'm looking for, but are always accountable. We don't have any department heads that have the mentality of, spend it or lose it. So if something happens, like, for example, the chief had a lower than expected salary line item, she doesn't rush to spend that remaining money because she's afraid she won't get it the next year. We've never taken that approach on schools and towns or with the warrant committee. A lot of towns will do that. Use it or lose it. If you didn't spend it, your budget is automatically cut by that amount the next year. And I think while there are some budgets that definitely need looking at to be decreased for that, it's not usually our department head budgets that are impacted by that. For example, our health insurance budget. We talked about that repeatedly, that it's very hard to budget who's going to come off and on during the year. So we have to leave ourselves a significant cushion Because I could be facing a $20,000 increase if I have one person added to the health insurance budget. So, something happens, we end up with 5 people, we have to have that kind of cushion on hand for that.
Would you say there's a trend here? If I look, I mean, without going through every individual number, I'm sure, and I know some of the spikes have a story behind them, like you said, with the police turn back or what have you. But if you look at just look at the total for the town and the total for the schools, it seems as though it's going up.
I think some of that can be attributed to some of the CARES and ARPA money that we had. We were able to find some of our projects. That
The
we funded through
uncertainty of
outside
COVID
sources.
and,
I mean, you saw that in, 20, right, FY20 was the,
Funny is, yeah.
was the big, $2 million, turn back, but. I mean, there seems to be there's explanations behind all of these.
sure. Oh, yeah, no, I'm not looking for that. I'm just looking for that overall.
Yeah,
Because if it was
But I mean,
if you anticipate 1 million turn back, it'd be a big deal, right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, it's, I think, but, all these line items, from a percentage standpoint, there's only a handful that are really big items that stick out. And the unemployment, we talked about that, the health insurance, the police, and then the refinancing, those are the big
Those are the big ones.
ones, and,
Almost have to look at it as a percentage of the total budget.
Yeah.
The expense
Right.
budget, at the end of the way,
yeah,
what, 2 to 3% or something like that
yeah.
is the historical.
So thank you for putting this together.
No, it's really helpful.
I would love to take credit, but Frank's been working on this for
Thank you,
a
Frank.
couple of months now. Thanks, Frank. Take credit for working on that, so. And honestly, looking at that is good for all of us. It's actually, we've already been talking about health insurance, and I can give you a brief update on that. But some of the information on the health insurance turnbacks, Frank's been able to do kind of a bigger in-depth analysis and kind of a deeper analysis of what we're doing for health insurance, so that even if we don't have plan design changes, are there little tweaks we can do here and there in the budget to better estimate who could come on or not. Because you don't really know, but we could, look at our historical trend if we could come on or not. Especially now
Yeah.
post-COVID, that's a little easier to do. We definitely didn't want to do that.
Is there anything you want to update us on that you can on health insurance?
Sure. So we received word from Blue Cross Blue Shield through Maya, our insurance company, that we were facing an 8.7% health insurance increase. I contacted the Employees Insurance Advisory Committee, which is made up of representatives from the different unions and the non-union employees. I met with them last week. They also were not happy about an 8.7% increase in their health insurance. We asked Blue Cross Blue Shield to come in and meet with us. They proposed 3 changes. One, which seemed very advantageous to both the town and the employees. And the Employees Insurance Advisory Union group is taking that back to the different unions, and the non-union employees are considering it as well. It would take it down to a 2.7% increase versus the 8.7.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a big deal.
What, can you talk about what it is that?
Sure, it's instituting a deductible. It's not a typical high deductible plan. It is a deductible that would be $250 for individuals and $750 maximum for families. And that deductible would only be on some 3D imaging, hospital stays, emergency room visits, inpatient care, more of your higher user, more of an event rather than your daily typical usage, and going to the doctor and your regular co-pays would not contribute to that deductible at all.
It's not an event, it's annual.
It's an annual, yeah.
And that's the world today.
Sure it is.
That's kind of, that's what everybody's saying.
The world was
All of you, but it does not change any of the existing co-pays that we have in the plan. It does not change any of the max out-of-pocket expenses in the plan. The only change would be instituting this one deductible.
Yeah.
So the Employees Insurance Advisory Committee was very open to it, and they've taken it back to everybody. We have asked everybody to come back within 3 weeks and let us know if we're moving forward with the 8.7 or with the 2.7.
And what comprises the employee insurance advisory committee?
So there's a representative from the teachers union, the retired teachers union, DPW is non-union, but they have representation, the non-union town hall employees, police department and fire department. And there's several other unions underneath the teachers, such as the custodians, the clerical. I'm forgetting a few of them, but I think there's 6 or 7 on the school side. Who all have representation on that committee.
And we'll know probably, by the, first week of March.
I think we asked the first week of March, I think is the
Yeah.
deadline we gave
So-
that. We'd like to get an indication if we're gonna head that way.
Yeah.
Because then we won't need to cut the budgets as drastically as we've been talking. If we can get this, in place, it could save us, approximately $350,000 to $400,000. So, that gets a significant, move on our delta between revenue and expenditures.
This is obviously a hypothetical. Suppose that several of the groups come back and say yes, and fire department says no.
Can't move forward unless everybody agrees.
Everybody interested. But I think the, sort of I think the number of people that are on these big Cadillac plans, I call them Cadillac plans,
That is the official name.
it's a small number. It's not a big percentage, so I think the hope is that they would have, agreement.
It's not definitely reasonable to me, I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
yeah.
What,
Well,
that's
it-
a good question, but I'm
Yeah,
one
yeah,
group.
it's a good question.
But the increase relates to both the individual and to the town. It says we have
Right.
the town's a bigger piece. So I mean, it's a motivation for the individual to see them
Oh,
instead of go from 8 to 2. It's,
Yes.
so
Which
that's,
is why they're interested in it.
yeah,
Very
of course. And if they know that their medical history and
Yeah,
clearly that's the,
And back in 2020, we were faced with a similar increase in our health insurance. We met with the Employee Insurance Advisory Committee and they came down, I think it was close to 6%. They were able to save us back in 2020. And we did it in a very short amount of time. So they felt very
Yeah.
positive that we could.
I mean,
move forward on
this-
again.
I could just say, I know from my own experience at the firm I was at, KPMG, they went through the same process and the Blue Cross Blue Shield Cadillac plan just got more and more expensive and ended up going away. And they got a deductible plan, and that was 5 years ago. So it's just the trend is,
30 years ago, the CFO of a company had told the Blue Cross Blue Shield that I was gonna go to the market. They couldn't believe it. It was,
Yeah.
nobody does that. I said, well, yeah, they do.
yeah.
But it's been going
And
on.
just so we do offer a high deductible plan for our employees. We don't have a significant number of takers on that plan, but we do have that available as well.
Nice, yeah.
And
But this
the,
sounds like a nice middle ground that people are interested in.
I think so. I think when Carrie, who's our rep from Blue Cross, came out and showed the analysis of what you would save in that 8.7 versus 2.7, far exceeds the 750 if you had to meet that deductible. So it's a
Yeah.
cost savings, even if you were, a family that used it.
Had an
not up to
event,
that 750.
then the other piece that you put in is the appendix. Now, I did the regional comparison.
Oh, we started doing this a couple of years ago, when our free cash increased, during COVID, we were just using it as a benchmark to show what other towns, were having a similar increase in free cash based on that CARES money we're receiving, so. It's always interesting, I think, to look at everybody in the area.
And just from my own reading of this, a couple of things come to mind. One is you see a couple of towns that really dipped into their free cash to cover COVID. Right? So whether layoffs or different things or whatever they did. But I think the other piece I think it's an important document because it shows that whilst our free cash position is improving, it's not as strong as it probably needs to be relative to the towns around us. So I mean, and I say that because some people come back and go, well, you got all this free cash. It's not free cash, but it's responsible, but it's important that we see it in that context that
Well, and I think it's important also to know that our free cash amount that we have on hand is based on our financial policy.
Yeah, so policy,
So,
and it's a percentage of the budget, so
right,
in these towns here,
they may
you
or may
know,
not have
I'm not
that.
sure, like Norwood, we should be comparing ourselves, their budget is
Yeah.
huge.
Right.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
awfully high, 7.7. Wow.
oh, that's Westwood.
I know. But I, you know, I think it's important to remember back in 2018 and 2019 that we were spending all of our free cash without having the financial policy. But prior to the 2019, we didn't have a set amount we had to keep on hand. So there were some years where we spent all of it and started that next year with nothing.
No, I,
So you
I
only
agree.
had your budgetary turnbacks, your
Yeah.
local receipts that were estimated high. Other than that, you had no base amount to start with.
No, and I mean, to me, it says we need that fiscal discipline and we're using it
Yes.
and we're putting it in there, but we're not rich. Let me look at Walpole. I mean, that's 10 million. I know that's a different town too, but I mean, even the other towns that are closer in comparison, it's
Right.
at
And-
best a reasonable number.
And this is, you know, I do sometimes hate doing comparisons, and I think you just mentioned it as well. Some of these towns have commercial tax rates. Some of these towns, don't have financial policies. Some of them have very different spending habits when it comes to free cash, versus us. So kind of all
Yeah,
have to
it's-
take all of that into consideration.
They may not have a capital stabilization, they may not have a municipal stabilization.
Right,
I
right.
mean, we have some healthy reserves and we have healthy mechanisms that have been set up for the future to establish those reserves.
No, I think the overall message is important. I mean, I think it's very important, and we may not like comparisons, but people compare.
Right. No,
You
absolutely.
know, I mean, you know that better than I do.
All right, so, anything else?
The only other thing I wanted to point out is I gave everybody an updated fiscal year 24 budget worksheet. And so you'll get a new one of these at every time we meet, and we're hopefully still moving in the right direction. So the delta we have now is just over 740,000, 746.46. Since our last meeting, we have changed the contribution that we're using from the pension reserve trust fund. We have permission from CARAC as of today on that. And then due to the refunding that Georgia talked about earlier, there were some reserves that could be appropriated towards this year's budget. So it was about $25,000 that we were able to put in as another available fund. So we're at 740 as of this afternoon.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any, Matt, you want to give a
Sure.
quick update on the school building committee?
Yeah. So we had our first meeting. What do you think? It was, no, it's on the second. It was pretty high level. It was pretty much just introductions and kind of overall statement of goals for the committee. In general, if you would like to watch that meeting, it's on, it's on Zoom. You can go back and watch it. The Medfield Insider has sent out an update for some bullet points, kind of high level updates that occurred during the meeting. And I'm gonna kind of keep it. I think it's best to kind of, for now, keep our updates, my updates to the committee, what has been published and what is public versus kind of opinionated updates. There was no action needed from the warrant committee thus far. Our next meeting is going to take place at the Dale Street School, so that the whole committee can kind of get a walkthrough and a feel for what that school's current physical condition is, and that'll be taking place on, I think it's the, let's see, on the calendar we have, it's going to be on the 2nd of March. So just some quick notes here. We still need a chair. So we're still trying to figure out who's going to be the chair of the committee. No, absolutely not. And, there's just some general discussion around how we can best use the community resources, what we already know from the past process, where we are. Way ahead starting this process than we were at the beginning of the last one. General time frame, you know. I have to submit to the MSBA process. We have to submit in December. So we have a lot of work to do between now and then to kind of figure out if we're going to work with state or go it alone. So a lot to do. A lot of meetings to have, but really nothing actionable now. And I suggest if you do want to see these, you kind of zoom in and watch them and pay attention to the Medfield Insider updates because they'll be pretty comprehensive, I'm sure. So.
No, I watched the meeting, and one of the questions I have is maybe for the group, but you know, from your perspective, the presentation that Steve had put together and made to the Warrant Committee.
Yeah.
To kind of set some guidelines,
Mhm.
or maybe what I think what we talked about, called them the bumpers,
Yeah.
right? What's your thoughts there in terms of bringing that forward to the committee?
I think there will be a time and place to bring that forward. I do. I think this meeting, I think these first meetings was definitely like, who are we? What are we doing?
Yeah.
You know, assigning roles.
Yep.
Assigning, kind of getting expectations for the committee. Very high level, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that's as we get into assigned duties and get into the nitty gritty, I think there's a very good spot for that analysis that Steve did, for sure. I think it would overwhelm people right now on the committee.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I'm not, yeah, I'm just,
No.
I'm thinking in terms
I mean,
of,
it's public knowledge, so everybody can reference it, it was
Right.
brought up here, so, you know,
Yeah,
I can call attention to it if we think it's something we should do.
it's on YouTube,
Is it?
Medfield TV, you know,
Yeah.
whatever that. You know, but I think, I agree, I think it's a little too.
yeah, no, I'm not proposing it at a time. I'm just wondering what the tenor is.
I think there's the sense that I got from this meeting is that there's gonna be a real push to re-educate the town on the options. And it should be factual. There was talk of hiring a consultant to bring, you know, to do that. So, you know, kind of putting the past in the past, starting fresh. What do we got? What do we want to do? You know, that's where
You know, just sort of thinking about what we're doing here in the next month or month and a half, and there's an article, whole placeholder for the money for the school building committee. And there'll be, I'm sure they'll ask for input from your committee.
Sure.
And we'll have some input on the amount probably too, but and probably the select board will weigh in on that.
Sure.
You know,
I'm sure.
But I know it's gonna probably come from free cash. And so when we talk about free cash, we'll have to look at what's available and have some dialogue around that.
Yeah.
I mean, we gave them $250 last year.
Mhm.
They haven't spent that.
Nope.
So, but that's probably not enough to get them, you know, through next year's town meeting, I guess.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah,
Probably not. With what's kind of being discussed. I mean,
yeah,
it's all high level right now.
Yeah.
There's been no commitment to do anything or go one way or another. So.
yeah.
But not to put a point on it, but that December MSBA is that's the defining time. That's when you decide whether it's gonna be a, you know,
Are we going with us? Are we going by ourselves?
yeah, we're going alone. It could be a whole different,
Oh, yeah.
a different
Well, hopefully-
presentation.
Hopefully they will have a choice to make. Because they have to apply by
Right,
the end of April,
right.
and then they have to get accepted. If they don't get accepted, there's no choice.
There's no choice.
Yeah.
But if they get accepted, I'm not very familiar at all. Aren't you then in a pipeline that can take 4 years or something?
Yeah. But you're also good and bad. You're bound by the state's rules, which can be helpful to get the process done. So
I mean,
There's trade-offs.
there's money there, right? But there's also,
There's strings
think of them
attached.
like the
There's
bank, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna kind of, they're gonna watch you and they have their rules and you have to kind of comply with them, but. You know, there's real money there and, you know, there's. The process of building doesn't change drastically. It's,
Right.
you still have 2 years of construction and a
You
year
probably have,
of
you
detailed
probably have 4
design.
years anyway.
You know, there's,
Oh, easily,
it's
yeah.
gonna take a while, no matter what you do, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a question of, well, there's a lot of questions, right? But as I said, it's, if we go along, it's gonna be a different school.
It's a whole
If you
different,
don't.
it's a whole different discussion.
I can't imagine going it alone and foregoing, 19 million last time. How are you gonna go it alone? How are you gonna make up and save 19 million? That's a pretty big discount.
I don't.
Someone would have to explain that, to me pretty careful.
it's serious cash. Yeah. I mean, it has to be a,
Some people think you can, so
Yeah, no, there's.
you can.
It's a front-end loaded process. We're gonna have to figure it out in the next few months.
Yeah,
What we're gonna do, you know. Yeah, the conversation changes in December, you know.
okay, well, I hope we get in, at least we can have a decision to make.
Yeah.
So, all right,
I'll keep updating as we have meetings and, yeah.
anything else anybody else wants to bring up? Talk about, okay. All right, so entertain a meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right,
Aye.
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
Jillian
Yes, hi.
and Jeremy,
Aye.
meeting is adjourned.
Aye.
Have a good night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.